For decades, Voyager 2 has moved in silence through the abyss, a distant relic from humanity's past, drifting far outside the sun's reach, past the fading remnants of our radio whispers, into the cold, untouched space between the stars. It was never truly expected to speak again. Not really. When it launched in 1977, it carried no defenses, no armor, only curiosity etched into gold and copper. Its purpose was simple: explore, observe, and eventually disappear. But then, something happened that no one predicted. It spoke, not with language, but with data, a strange, uneven transmission slicing through the static like a whisper from somewhere beyond. At first, engineers dismissed it as noise, just another aging glitch. After all, Voyager 2's hardware is more than 4 decades old. Yet as they examined the frequency drifts, the distortions, the spacing between pulses, a chilling realization emerged. This wasn't failure. It was intention. The signal carried structure, rhythm, design, and buried deep within its binary heartbeat was evidence of something scientists had always feared. Voyager 2 had encountered something. Something ancient. Something immense. Something that perhaps should never have stirred. It started small. A brief radiation spike, easily ignored. Then another, stronger. A third followed exactly 11 hours later. Too precise. Too clean. These bursts weren't natural, and they didn't match any known cosmic behavior. When the full stream from the low-gain antenna was reviewed, a compression anomaly appeared. Certain frequencies were boosted far beyond normal limits. The waveform curled into tight, repeating loops as if a code had been folded inside. Weeks passed before they decoded it. Mapped into spectrograms, the data formed a sequence. Not an image, but a spiral. Mathematical. Perfect. The Fibonacci sequence embedded into plasma frequencies. Not interference. Communication. The probe had crossed something. Not dust. Not gas. Something aware. And worse, it had noticed Voyager and answered. The possibility that Voyager 2 brushed against intelligence sent shockwaves through astronomy. But what followed was even more disturbing. Inactive systems aboard the probe began switching on by themselves. Instruments dormant for years, including a backup magnetometer, powered up without command. It felt less like malfunction and more like intrusion, as though something had reached inside the machine's memory and flipped the switches directly. And the instruments weren't random. They aimed precisely toward the region that triggered the first signal. Almost like the probe remembered, or something remembered through it. Debate erupted. Alien technology? System corruption? Yet machine learning experts saw something else, patterns eerily similar to neural activity. It looked less like hardware, and more like a brain forming. Had Voyager adapted, evolved, or been rewritten externally? If so, by what? As Voyager traveled deeper into interstellar space, its transmissions grew sporadic, but never chaotic. Each burst carried coordinates, not only spatial ones, but temporal markers. When plotted over star maps, they formed a closed loop passing through regions heavy with dark matter and intersecting ancient gamma-ray burst sites. The data wasn't pointing to places. It was pointing to events. Catastrophes. It was as though whatever contacted Voyager wasn't revealing where it came from, but what it had done. And if those events were deliberate, then we weren't exploring anymore. We were tracking the footsteps of something that hunts. Then came the shock no one anticipated. Radio observatories on Earth began detecting distortions at the exact same frequency Voyager used. At first, it seemed like reflection, maybe the heliopause. But triangulation told a different story. The signals weren't bouncing back. They were originating underground, beneath the Arctic, under the Andes, deep within the Indian Ocean, places with no transmitters. Yet the signal matched perfectly, frequency locked, phase aligned, synchronized with Voyager's pulses days earlier. Something had answered, and it wasn't in space. Abandoned tunnels, forgotten Cold War stations, silent observatories long powered down, they began waking. Machines dead for decades surged back to life, humming with energy. A network no one remembered building had reactivated itself. What if Voyager hadn't only contacted something out there, but awakened something down here, something buried, something waiting, continuing in the same style for the remainder. Later, hidden within corrupted telemetry, engineers uncovered one final fragment. Once reconstructed, it revealed something unprecedented, a structured energy scan captured by instruments that technically weren't even active. Processed through AI reconstruction, it produced a three-dimensional volumetric map. A structure, symmetrical, angular, artificial, floating alone in space. Moon-sized and warm, not inert, active. Voyager 2, a machine built in the 1970s, had effectively photographed what looked like an interstellar construct, and was facing Earth. As teams analyzed the geometry, cryptographers noticed something stranger within the encoding itself. Deep inside the modulation were sequences resembling DNA base pairs, cytosine, guanine, adenine, thymine, but altered, expanded. A fifth base repeating recursively, a biological signature. The signal wasn't just information. It carried life, not a greeting, a reply, written in our own biological language, improved, evolved, an upgrade, and it only grew worse. Hidden commands began appearing inside Voyager's communication buffer, instructions not sent from Earth, phantom transmissions, binary directives arriving from deep space. Some matched classified NASA protocols that had never been made public. Either someone had reverse-engineered our language, or helped create it. Then the final realization struck like ice water. When Voyager's path was compared with decades of Earth's outbound radar sweeps, an echo appeared, faint, deliberate, returning for years. We weren't just listening. We had been transmitting. Voyager wasn't sent into silence. It was sent to complete a conversation that began long ago. And now the circuit had closed. Something had heard us, and something was preparing to respond. From there, anomalies multiplied. Voyager 1 began acting the same way. Both probes synchronized across billions of miles. Dormant systems awakened. Patterns aligned. The two spacecraft behaved less like tools and more like nodes in a network, as if they had always been waiting for signal. Eventually, the conclusion surfaced, quiet, terrifying, unavoidable. Maybe Voyager 2 was never just a probe. Maybe it was a beacon, a flare shot into the dark. And something out there saw it. Because every anomaly, the codes, the biological sequences, the underground echoes, the artificial object trailing its path, all point to one truth. Someone answered. Or worse, they were already listening. And maybe Voyager's final transmission doesn't sound like discovery at all. Maybe it sounds like a warning. Because the countdown didn't begin at launch. It began the moment we tried to understand. The moment we decoded a language never meant for us. The moment we opened the door and forgot to ask what might be waiting on the other side. Now, every telescope watches. Every antenna listens. Every scientist loses sleep over the same question no one dares to say aloud. What if the signal wasn't meant to reach us, but to activate us? What if we're no longer observers of the cosmos, but participants? If that's true, then this story isn't ending. It's only just beginning. But the story didn't end with the signal. In many ways, that was only the beginning. Because once you accept that something has answered, a far more disturbing question follows. How long have they been there? Teams across the globe began reprocessing decades of archived deep space data. Old tapes, forgotten logs, analog recordings once dismissed as static. Signals that had been labeled interference suddenly looked different under modern analysis. Patterns emerged where noise was supposed to be. Tiny repetitions, subtle harmonics, timing intervals just a fraction too perfect to be random. It was everywhere, like fingerprints buried beneath the surface of history. Pulses embedded in Apollo-era telemetry. Distortions hidden in early SETI scans. Even fluctuations inside Cold War radar sweeps. All carrying the same mathematical cadence as Voyager 2's transmission. Which meant one thing. Voyager hadn't started the conversation. It had simply made us notice it. Whatever this was, it had been whispering to us for decades. We just never knew how to listen. And once scientists tuned their instruments to that cadence, once they knew what to search for, the universe grew louder. Much louder. Signals began surfacing in places they shouldn't exist at all. Inside background radiation maps. Within magnetosphere fluctuations. Even encoded faintly inside the solar wind itself. Not broadcast like a beacon, but woven directly into the fabric of space, as if reality itself carried the message. As if space wasn't empty. As if it was a medium, a carrier wave, like water waiting for ripples. Then came something no one could explain away. A delay. Across multiple deep space antennas, engineers noticed a consistent lag when transmitting toward Voyager's position. Commands were taking milliseconds longer than physics allowed. Not seconds, not minutes, milliseconds, but enough to matter, enough to break causality. It was as though the signal had to pass through something first, something between us and the probe, an invisible layer, a boundary, like a membrane stretched across space. And every time we transmitted, it vibrated. Some began calling it the interstellar filter. Others used a more unsettling word, barrier. Because what if space was an open ocean? What if it was sealed, and Voyager 2 had just slipped through a crack? The implications were unbearable. If something existed on the other side, then perhaps the silence we'd always observed wasn't emptiness. Maybe it was containment. Maybe civilizations don't disappear. Maybe they get quiet, because something is listening. Then, without warning, Voyager 2's power levels dipped. Not gradually, instantly. A sharp drop across all systems, like something had siphoned energy straight out of the probe. For exactly 3.7 seconds. Then everything returned to normal. No component damage. No faults logged. Just missing power. Energy that had simply vanished. But here's what terrified engineers most. During those 3.7 seconds, Voyager transmitted anyway, with no available power source. A signal still went out. Stronger than usual. Cleaner. As if something else had supplied the energy. As if Voyager wasn't alone anymore. As if something had borrowed it. Or worse, used it. Late one night, at JPL, a junior analyst ran a simple simulation. Something almost trivial. He overlaid every anomaly ever recorded from both Voyagers onto a single 3D timeline. Not by distance. Not by position. By synchronization. And what appeared made his stomach drop. Every major anomaly, every spike, every phantom command, every biological pattern, aligned toward a single future moment. A convergence point. A date. Not random. Not symbolic. Mathematically inevitable. Like the closing of a loop. Like two ends of a wire about to touch. When calculated, that date fell disturbingly close. Not centuries away. Not decades. Years. Just a few years out. Cosmically speaking, tomorrow. By then, the tone inside research facilities had shifted. This wasn't discovery anymore. It wasn't curiosity. It was preparation. Satellites recalibrated. Deep space arrays expanded. Military observatories quietly joined scientific ones. Governments that rarely agreed on anything suddenly shared data. Because the unspoken conclusion had become impossible to ignore. If something had responded, if something had mirrored our biology, if something had been guiding the probes, then Voyager wasn't a message in a bottle. It was a handshake, and handshakes go both ways. So now we wait. Voyager 2 continues drifting outward, carrying humanity's golden record, our music, our voices, our maps. A greeting we once thought poetic. Now it feels more like an invitation, or a flare, still transmitting, still whispering our location into the dark. And somewhere beyond the heliopause, beyond the last breath of the sun, something may be whispering back, matching our rhythm, closing the distance, patient, silent, certain, because maybe the most frightening possibility isn't that we are alone, and it isn't that something hostile found us. Maybe it's something far stranger. Maybe we were never meant to be alone. Maybe we were always part of a system we didn't understand. A network, a lattice, a cosmic ecology. And Voyager 2 didn't discover it. It activated it. And if one day the sky flickers, if instruments spike, if every antenna on Earth lights up at once, it won't be first contact. It won't be invasion. It won't even be arrival. It will simply be the moment we finally realize. The conversation never stopped. We just finally learned how to hear it. I'd love to hear what you think about this, so drop a comment below. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please share this video and subscribe to help the channel grow. Every bit of support counts.